Remember the toys you knew you wanted but never had? For me, that was the AT-AT Walker and the Snowspeeder. But we all had those toys we didn't know we wanted until it was too late. In my case, that was the G.I. Joe Tomahawk.
G.I. Joe, G.I. Joe.
Everyone has their own opinion when G.I. Joe jumped the shark in the 1980s. Most agree the Real American Hero was solid from 1982 to 1985. The popularity that had built up around the Joes in that time was immense, culminating in the USS Flag aircraft carrier playset, the largest playset ever made for an action figure series. The next year, 1986, was arguably G.I. Joe's most popular year, but it's hard to deny that it was also a transitional year for the toy series. You had Cobra soldiers turning into androids called Bats, and they introduced Dr. Mindbender and Serpentor into the figure line. And at that same time, all of the vehicles in the fleet started to become very sci-fi and very outlandish. You had some unforgettable toys, the Cobra Terrordrome, the Night Raven, the Conquest X-30, but you also had things like the Havoc and the Cobra Stun. They were kinda cool, but they were certainly a departure from the more grounded military styling the line was known for. 1986 saw the debut of a neon green G.I. Joe character named Sci-Fi, who could have been the brother of RoboCop. That's what makes the Tomahawk a very special entry in the G.I. Joe vehicle lineup that year. The Tomahawk feels like a holdover from 1985. When you look at the vehicle, it looks more like the vehicles from the 85 catalog than it does from the 86 catalog, which are very futuristic and heading in a different direction. It's like Hasbro didn't want the mold to go to waste, but they didn't get it out in time the year before. With a desert brown camouflage pattern and the rather realistic design, this is almost the flying version of the G.I. Joe hovercraft, and is the only vehicle in the 1986 lineup that looks like it could be a real-world vehicle from end to end, like an upgraded Chinook. Yeah, the Conquest was based on a Grumman aircraft, but it was purely an experimental airplane in reality, and the Night Raven was an SR-71 on steroids, but it had that chintzy red-orange interior. I'm not saying those weren't great toys. The Night Raven rocks, but it doesn't look like old-school G.I. Joe. The Tomahawk was just as at home alongside the original G.I. Joe headquarters as it was on the deck of the USS Flag playset, or the backyard. It had realistic features like the rear troop access ramp, the crew seating, and the defensive machine guns, as well as the rescue winch and two-person seating in the cockpit. This helicopter had it all. The drawbacks were mainly limited to these engine rotors. They're huge, they don't fold up, and so it makes it very difficult to find a place to store this toy when you're not using it. The other additional gripe about this toy is the canopy, which had a hinge that opened from the bottom, and because it was, well, dependent on gravity, the hinges would often wear out. This is a very common problem. The pilot, codenamed Lift Ticket, is a rather sad-looking figure. His face has a goofy expression, his head is huge thanks to the helmet that's molded onto it. I don't know why they didn't make that removable. And because his face is painted on, most of the figures you'll find have the dreaded nose rub problem. And if that's not enough, he came with a tiny helmet microphone that was removable and always gets lost. I think the reason that I was late to the table with the Tomahawk as a kid is because I didn't appreciate helicopters until I got a little older. I was into fast ground vehicles and fighter jets. That means I liked the Vamp Jeeps, the AW Strikers, and the Cobra Rattlers. I didn't have much use for the Dragonfly or the Fang when I was younger. So at the height of my G.I. Joe buying in 1988, when I'm looking through an older G.I. Joe toy pamphlet, I took a long second look at the Tomahawk, and I realized what a mistake I'd made. It didn't help ease my mind one bit that the Tomahawk featured in G.I. Joe Special Missions number 8, one of my first G.I. Joe comic books from Marvel, and played a major role in G.I. Joe issue number 96, aiding in the rescue of Scarlet, Snake Eyes, and Storm Shadow. Frustratingly, all of us kids knew that Hasbro cycled out their G.I. Joe toys every 2 years. I couldn't get the Tomahawk anymore. It was too late. I didn't get one for myself until 2011, but I can tell you, it was everything I thought it would be. Hasbro has released a replica called the Eaglehawk, with some improvements such as folding rotor blades, but it lacks some of the great details of the original, like the glass flooring under the cockpit. The Tomahawk was, in many ways, the last flight of old-school Real American Hero toys. In 1987, the Joes had their own space shuttle, and Cobra had a ballistic pogo stick. By 1988, Hasbro was recycling all the old vehicles with outlandish new paint schemes and calling them things like Tiger Force, Night Force, Python Patrol, and Sky Patrol. Just look at this! The real American hero phenomenon that began in toy aisles in 1982 with those army green tanks and jeeps flew off into the sunset in 1986 with the G.I. Joe Tomahawk, and the Hasbro toy line was never the same.
Take a look at the new G.I. Joe Tomahawk.
Look, Cobra's attacking the All-Striker. Tomahawk to the rescue.
Tomahawk holds 8 Joes and it's loaded for battle.
Yo, Joe!
Tomahawk's gonna chase some Cobra. Tomahawk is on the go. Tomahawk's gonna chase some Cobra and rescue G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe!
Live the adventure of G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe Tomahawk. Other Joe and Cobra figures sold separately.
Yo, Joe!